I've been looking out for radio memorabilia all day. Why? Because Chelmsford is home to the wireless. And it's here that Italian Guglielmo Marconi set up the world's first factory for producing radio receivers and transmitters in 1899. I'm at the Science and Industry Museum, where Marconi made some of his first radio broadcasts. In 1901, Marconi successfully transmitted radio signals across the Atlantic, from England to Newfoundland in Canada. Up until then, many people believed it would be impossible and that these signals would just get lost in space. But Marconi was convinced that the transmissions would follow the curvature of the Earth, and he was proved right. To find out more, I've come to talk to Jeff Bowles, the museum's curator. Jeff, as a schoolboy, I've always believed that Marconi's first transmission was with voice, but it wasn't, was it?
No, Marconi called his system wireless telegraphy, and it was a system of signalling using radio waves, mostly between ships and the shore, and between ship and ship.
So this was Morse code?
This was using the Morse code, not a voice system.
Was this typical of the apparatus on board ship?
This was a receiver. This is the receiving end of the system. The transmitting end was a spark. The receiving end here is the coherer. Right. It looks nothing like a radio receiver as we would know it now.
And what age is this?
This was made in Chelmsford at the Hall Street factory in 1905, so it really is in the early days of radio.
One of the pioneering ones.
Yes, indeed.
It was terribly important for ships. Why was that?
Well, they were totally isolated away from shore, and you couldn't run a wire from a ship to shore.
No, obviously. Have you any examples of where this came into great use?
Well, the classic one is the Titanic in 1912. And 700 people really owed their lives to the wireless transmissions from ship to ship.
So when did voices first start to get used in transmissions?
The first experiments were in about 1900, but it wasn't really until the First World War when reliable radio valves were developed. And they also had a need to do so because they needed to communicate with aircraft.
Exactly.
And you can't use Morse code on an aircraft.
The military breakthrough was soon turned to commercial use, and by 1922, the Marconi factory was producing radios capable of picking up voices. The radio era had begun.
This is Golf X-Ray Zero, Mike Whiskey Tango calling.
Well, we've heard about the history of radio and its technical development. Now let's find out about what's collectible and how much we should pay for it. And who better to talk to than Chris Halton. Chris?
Hi, Paul.
You're a collector. Now, judging by this lot,
yes,
Art Deco has a very important part in style.
it has, and it's all very touchy-feely as well, isn't it? And I think that if you're going to collect radios, it's best to stick to one particular theme.
Right.
My style is basically anything which is manufactured from roughly 1930 all the way through to the early 1950s.
Now, you've singled out these two, and this one actually has caught my eye. I like this one. Tell me about this.
Those two radios were actually Nazi propaganda sets. They were produced by Hitler's propaganda ministry from around 1934 all the way through to toward the end of the war. At the end of World War II, the victorious Allied soldiers from all over the world took those sets from Germany in the back of their knapsacks.
Yeah, they're quite portable, aren't they? It's a good size.
They're very portable. For many, many years, these radios held a premium price. This would sell for between 150 to 200 pounds. But there's been a large inflow of radios from Eastern Europe, and the price has dropped considerably. The price on this particular set now would set you back, in this condition, around 100 pounds. And the larger set at the bottom around £150. But even so, they're still very interesting and still very desirable radios to collect.
Now, this one looks a bit of fun. It looks really kitsch and very 50s.
Yes, it has.
It's slightly out of place in the rest of the
What does it remind you of?
A Cadillac.
Yeah, it's a Crosley dashboard radio, model D25. It's a clock radio with an alarm. I bought this from America. It cost me around $85, but restored as it is now in English, it's worth over £200. So
that's quite a rare little item then.
It's a lovely radio, isn't it?
Yeah. Now that has caught my eye. That looks really interesting.
It's a home broadcaster made by GEC in the late 1940s. For any aspiring DJ, that was the microphone to own. The interesting thing on the logo there, on the design, you can see a picture of the apparatus actually in operation. But with its original box, in that condition, it's worth around £45. So it's quite a nice item to own. And it's made out of beautiful brown Bakelite.
I do like a Bakelite finish, though. So that really is like the very early forms of karaoke.
It is.
Chris, what a great collection. I have to say, though, that one is my favourite. I'm not a big fan of Art Deco, but that one has a contemporary look. And around £950, it is the expensive one.
Golf Bravo 2, Golf Mike, Golf Bravo 2, Guglielmo Marconi, which is what it is. This is Golf X-Ray 0, Mike Whiskey Tango calling. It's a most nostalgic situation.
We're back on the auction wavelength. But before we get started, let's remind ourselves of our top 10 hits.